think once you've gotten to the point that you want, as you have in the West, you tend to be impatient and you don't give people the same time horizon that it took you to get there. In 1960, if you were an employee in Holland and you had a child and you're a woman, they would fire you. In France, women couldn't open bank accounts until the mid-70s. In Switzerland, they couldn't vote until the 70s. In America, the first 100 years, women didn't have the right to vote.
Yes, we know that history, but are you saying someday you will reach this type of democracy?
Very quick. Well, I'm not saying democracy. Every country has its own system of government. I'm saying in terms of liberties for people, in terms of freedoms, in terms of transparency, in terms of human rights, in terms of gender equality. Absolutely. This is the way, the path that we're moving towards. And what happened in the last few years in Saudi Arabia? Women could drive, which was a silly issue. Segregation no longer exists in public spaces. The dress code has been relaxed. Women have access to the same jobs as men. We appointed women ambassadors and women ministers. We have a situation where we are reforming our education system, our legal system, and everything. And we are introducing recreation, entertainment, tourism. More than 50 countries, their citizens can come to Saudi Arabia without a visa.
But then again, you had some major controversies also with the West regarding, for instance, the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi while he was in Saudi custody. I noted that you really dispute that. But do you acknowledge that at least this story has done very severe harm to the image of Saudi Arabia?
Definitely. Absolutely. It was a terrible mistake and we pay a price for it. And we continue to pay a price for it. But mistakes, unfortunately, happened. In the United States, you had Abu Ghraib in Iraq. Did the commander of American forces know about it? No. Did the Secretary of Defense know about it? No. Did the President know about it? No.
The UN states that this was on the order from the kingdom. The CIA states that along with many Western intelligences.
That's not correct. I think the United Nations didn't do anything. You had the rapporteur, Agnes Kalamar, producing a report that was third-rate. She relied on interviews and she relied on newspaper articles. She never investigated. This is not an investigation, it was her opinion. So that's not a UN report.
But American intelligence, Turkish intelligence and so on?
With regards to United States intelligence, they never came to that conclusion. That was speculation by the media. American officials have never come to the conclusion that this is what happened. This was a mistake. Did George Bush know about Abu Ghraib? No. What did America do? They investigated, they put people on trial, they punished them, they put in place mechanisms to prevent it from happening again. This is exactly what we did. We do not have a history of killing our citizens. There is not one Saudi who was killed by the government because of his or her political views.
But he was very much Khashoggi in contact with representatives of your government, wasn't he?
I told you that this was a mistake, a terrible mistake that should not have happened, and people are paying the price. We have 11 people who have been convicted. 4 or 5 of them are facing the death penalty. We do not murder people. This is not our policy. We have never had a situation like this.
There's a widespread perception in the West that it's dangerous to criticize Saudi Arabia. In 2018, Saudi Arabia reacted quite harshly to a tweet by the Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs. Let's talk about the tweet. How can a few words cause such an anger in one country, your country?
It's not the tweets. It's this idea of we demand that Saudi Arabia. Nobody demands anything of Saudi Arabia. If we came out,
she asked you to release the prisoners, yes?
If we came out and said we demand that Denmark does 1, 2, 3, would you accept it? We said no. This is not acceptable behavior from a friendly government. We will not tolerate it.
But still, it's just words. It's a politician having an opinion on your country.
It doesn't.
What's the big deal?
It doesn't matter. It came from a foreign minister of a country with whom we have diplomatic relations, and this is unacceptable diplomatic behavior, and Saudi Arabia is not a banana republic. We do not take criticism like this lightly.
So sorry to interrupt you. If this happened today, you wouldn't change a thing?
We have to see what happens. I hope it doesn't happen.
No, I'm asking because you're begging for investments. You're inviting the whole world to come to your country to do business.
We're not begging.
No, sorry for that.
The world is knocking on our door. We're not begging for investments.
You're opening your country.
Correct.
To entrepreneurs, to Danish businesses, and so on. My question then is shutting up the price of doing business with you, do one Danish company run the risk of being locked down in Saudi Arabia if one politician in Denmark speaks up?
We are saying that there's a way to have conversations. And we have conversations with our allies in the West all the time about all issues, including women's rights, including human rights. We are not shy about explaining what we're trying to do because we're trying to reform our country and move it forward. We do not accept dictates. We do not accept people telling us what to do. We're not a banana republic. If you want to pick up the phone and call me and say, I have a problem with this issue, that is totally acceptable. But to go public and say, we demand the release, who are you to demand? We are a sovereign country that has its own laws, and we're not saying to Canada, we demand that Canada give independence to Quebec. What would the Canadians say if we said this?
So now I understand what insulted you, but then again, your reaction, not only did you expel the Canadian ambassador to Saudi Arabia, you also froze in or put on hold the business activities of Canadian businesses. And then my question is, then again, one person spoke up and the whole country paid a price. What's the logic here?
It's not one person. It's the foreign minister who represents the country. If the foreign minister cannot represent the country, then they shouldn't be foreign minister.
By the way, Samar Badawi, the female activist that was the topic of this tweet, she's still in your custody. Detained is also another female activist, Adel Al-Jubeir.
I think that there's a lot of misinformation about this case. The issue had nothing to do with women's driving. The issue has to do with national security. They were cooperating with foreign powers in order to engage in subversive activities in Saudi Arabia, and that's what they were investigated, and this is why they're on trial. The issue of women driving, and because they advocated for it, they were jailed, is ridiculous. If we were jailing any woman in Saudi Arabia who wants to advocate for driving, half the women in Saudi Arabia would be in jail by now. This is not the case. This is an issue that involves national security. And when the trial is finished, people will know the facts.
I have just to refer to Amnesty International. About your courts, they state that it's a weapon for repression for the government.
That's their opinion, and their opinion is wrong, as it has been over the past 20 years. Amnesty International, other human rights groups were criticizing us in the early 90s for allowing radical clerics to preach hate and violence. And when we stopped it and put them in jail, they criticized us for taking away their freedom of expression. So our argument to these human rights groups was, do you want us to let them preach hate and violence, or do you want us to jail them? We cannot do both. So where this contradiction cannot continue, make up your mind, either one or the other.
But it seems that the Western politicians that you meet with on a regular basis, they trust Amnesty International more than they trust your version of the story. I just want to give you one quote of the Danish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jeppe Kofod, who you just met with today. He states, "We are witnessing a continuing limitation on freedom for civil society and the persecution of human rights campaigners and use of torture and death penalty." And once again, this is the guy you came to Denmark to meet and do business with. He seems to say, how can we trust you when it comes to questions like democracy?
I had a good conversation with him today, and I explained to him the background of many of the things, and I believe that the more we engage with each other, the more we dialogue with each other, the more we understand each other, the less misunderstandings we have.
Talking about your international goodwill, which you rely on, which you are dependent on, or the lack of such, I'd like to ask you a question about the American President-elect Joe Biden. In the campaign, he's been very critical towards Saudi Arabia and your track record on Jamal Khashoggi, for instance, on political prisoners, on your intervention in Yemen, on human rights in general. Some of the questions we touched upon in this interview. Do you acknowledge that this is a call for change that you cannot ignore?
I think what happens in the elections does not necessarily transfer into what happens when people get into office.
But there's a new sheriff in town, a new leader of the superpower.
President Trump criticized Saudi Arabia during the campaign. When he became president, Saudi Arabia was his first destination. No American president has visited any country besides, I believe, England, Canada, and Mexico. President Trump came to Saudi Arabia.
Joe Biden warns you, and I quote, that he will make you the pariah state that you are if you don't comply with his wishes.
We will see. When the people come in office, the situation changes.
So bottom line, no difference between Trump and Biden?
I think in terms of the fundamental interests of the two countries, I can't see a difference.